The viewer had clicked on the video, eager to watch a review about Alan Wake 2, and hear more about the newest game by Remedy, only to find the YouTuber doing a bit mimicking the style of narration and meta storytelling from the game. The viewer was suddenly compelled to click the like and subscribe button after seeing this, as the writing of the review was now starting to affect reality, and bringing these hot takes to life. The viewer resisted at first, before succumbing to the darkness that was the YouTube algorithm. Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror game developed by Remedy Entertainment and is a follow-up to the first Alan Wake game that came out back in 2010. There's one word that I feel fully encapsulates what it's like to play Alan Wake 2. Surreal. The game's story follows two characters, Saga Anderson, an FBI agent looking into the weird occurrences in Bright Falls, and the titular Alan Wake, who finds himself stuck in a loop in the dark place and is trying to find his way out. While that might sound pretty simple, the story is filled with plenty of twists and turns that go in directions you wouldn't expect, and over time I found myself even questioning what really did or didn't happen throughout the game. During the game, the player is able to switch between two stories at their own pace, and essentially experience two different styles of horror game. While playing as Saga, the player finds clues and other discoveries to slowly piece together the mystery behind all of the murders in Bright Falls, and as things unravel, only more questions arise. The horror in this section of the game comes from encountering monsters as you navigate the forest and just kind of deal with that sinking, uncanny valley feeling that you get as the citizens of Bright Falls only start to act stranger and stranger. Alan's sections, on the other hand, felt much more dreamlike, or nightmare-like, I should say, since the dark place is a weird reality that often defies logic, and most of the dark place has a liminal horror feel, like the back rooms. And it's often unsettling just walking around. It's like you're not supposed to be there and you're intruding on some dark evil force that wants you gone, which isn't far off from what's actually happening. I personally really enjoyed both sections of the game and love switching between the two. There's enough differences between the two to make each one have a distinct tone and vibe, while keeping enough in common that it didn't feel like you were playing a different game entirely. The gameplay in Alan Wake 2 is a refined upgrade of the first title's gameplay. It has elements that are common in survival horror games, walking around a creepy venue while picking up ammo or healing items and solving puzzles along the way as you progress. And of course, the game brings back the signature flashlight combat, where you need to shine a flashlight at an enemy to remove a darkness shield surrounding them before you're able to shoot them. Very similar to the hit game Luigi's Mansion, which makes sense when you consider that Luigi is actually a big fan of Alan Wake's books and the lore. The flashlight in Alan Wake 2 is awesome because it serves multiple purposes. Obviously it's used in combat as I mentioned earlier, but it is also used as a way of solving puzzles or finding collectibles. Sometimes when you shine the light on surfaces, it reveals yellow paint straight out of Resident Evil 4 Remake and shows you where a collectible is, or it gives you a hint on how to solve a puzzle. And the flashlight is, I think, what perfectly represents what I like about Alan Wake 2's gameplay. It really gets as much mileage as it can out of every mechanic and tool the game gives you. For example, when playing as Saga, you have access to the Mind Place, which is basically her own domain expansion. And in here you have the ability to look at the caseboard, which is a way of piecing together clues you've gotten through playing the game, and you can also track your progress on various collectibles. It's basically just an interactive menu, but it's diegetic in a way that it adds to the immersion and atmosphere of the game rather than pulling you out while you're trying to, kind of just manage and see where you're at in the game. And while the gameplay for Alan Wake 2 is great, I think the real highlight of the game for me is its narrative. This video is going to be spoiler free, so I'm not going to get into any specific details about what happens, but let me tell you, the story is full of twists and turns that leave you guessing what will happen next. There were many times where I felt like I knew what would happen, but then something completely unexpected happens instead. You really start to question what is real, what is fake, who's telling the truth, who's lying, and I felt like this was very fitting with the themes of the narrative. There's a lot to unpack and interpret, and even though it's been months now since I finished playing Alan Wake 2, I still find myself thinking back on different moments of the game, remembering how shocked I was, or moments that made me feel excited and happy, or, moments where I felt scared shitless. The only negatives I have to say about Alan Wake 2 were some of the bugs and performance issues I encountered while playing the game. Now, don't get me wrong, the game doesn't suffer as bad from these issues as some other games have, but I definitely noticed enough that it somewhat affected my experience. There was even a part where I ended up getting soft locked in my first playthrough because of like a bug. Basically, there was this puzzle that you were supposed to solve, but you needed to have an item that you collected earlier, but you weren't supposed to get into that area until you already had the item. So I was somehow able to skip needing the item to get into that area, but then the issue was that I couldn't backtrack until I solved that current puzzle. So I literally couldn't progress in the game from that point on because I didn't have the item to solve the puzzle, and I wasn't able to go back to get the item to solve it. So I ended up restarting my entire playthrough after 14 hours of gameplay and losing all of the collectibles and progress I had made. But what I think this anecdote highlights is just how good Alan Wake 2 is if I was willing to replay those 14 hours just to see how the story ended. And I even went on to get every single achievement in the game, which is something that I very rarely do. I am very much looking forward to the DLC stories they add to Alan Wake 2 and just generally seeing what else Remedy makes next. Playing Alan Wake 1 and Alan Wake 2 has made me instantly a fan of what they make, and I plan to play Control and probably Quantum Break and stuff next. So if you're looking for a great survival horror game packed with great story, characters, interesting and unique ideas, look no further than Alan Wake 2.